The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That quote haunted me for months after I returned from what I thought would be my salvation. At 58 years old, standing in the wreckage of what should have been my golden years, I realized I'd spent 3 years chasing a mirage that existed only in my desperate imagination. I suppose I should start at the beginning, though the beginning feels like it happened to someone else entirely. Someone more naive, more hopeful, more willing to believe that geographical relocation could solve problems that ran much deeper than postcodes. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happened and why it happened and how spectacularly wrong everything went, despite my absolute certainty that I was making all the right moves. Back in Manchester, I was what you'd call a functioning failure. Not homeless, not destitute, but not really living either. I'd worked the same factory job for 37 years, watched my mates get married, have kids, buy houses, while I just existed. Every Friday night down the pub, same conversations, same complaints, same dreams that never quite materialized. The Thailand talk started around 2019. Jimmy from the loading dock had gone over there for 2 weeks, came back with stories that made Thailand sound like some sort of paradise for blokes like us. "Mate," he'd say, pint in hand, eyes distant. "The women there actually appreciate a proper English gentleman. Not like these entitled birds here who want everything handed to them." Then there was Derek from accounting. Quiet Derek, who nobody paid much attention to, suddenly announcing he was moving to Thailand permanently. "Cost of living's nothing," he said. "My pension goes 5 times further there. Found myself a lovely girl half my age, treats me like a king." I started paying attention. See, here's what nobody tells you about being nearly 60 and alone. The loneliness doesn't just sit there quietly. It grows. It feeds on every empty evening, every weekend with nothing planned, every holiday spent watching other people's families on social media. By the time Thailand entered my consciousness, I wasn't just lonely, I was desperate. But I convinced myself it was practical thinking, smart financial planning. Why struggle in England when my £1,400 monthly pension could make me wealthy in Thailand? Why settle for being invisible to women here when I could be desirable there? The research phase lasted 8 months. I devoured every YouTube video, every blog post, every forum discussion about expat life in Thailand. But here's the thing about research when you're desperate. You only absorb the information that confirms what you want to believe. The warnings, the cautionary tales, the statistics about failed relationships and financial disasters, they bounced right off me. I wasn't reading about Thailand. I was reading about my future salvation. The flight to Bangkok in March 2022 felt like a rebirth. 13 hours in economy, knees pressed against the seat in front of me, but I didn't care. Every mile we flew was a mile further from everything I'd failed at. Bangkok hit me like a physical force, the heat, the noise, the sheer overwhelming foreignness of it all. But instead of being intimidated, I felt liberated. Nobody here knew I was a nobody. Nobody here had watched me fail for decades. I could be anyone I wanted to be. I'd booked a hotel on Sukhumvit Road for the first week, not too expensive, but decent enough to make me feel like I wasn't slumming it. The plan was simple: get oriented, find a nice area to live, meet some people, maybe find a girlfriend. Easy. The first shock came at breakfast. The hotel buffet cost more than I'd spend on food in an entire day back home. When I asked at reception about cheaper options, they directed me to street food stalls. Fair enough, I thought, when in Rome. But the street food stalls terrified me. The hygiene standards, the unrecognizable ingredients, the language barrier. I ended up eating at Western restaurants for the first 2 weeks, watching my carefully budgeted money disappear at an alarming rate. That's when I met Colin. Colin was one of those expats you meet in every bar in Thailand. Been there 15 years, married to a Thai woman 25 years younger, expert on everything Thai-related. He took one look at me, fresh off the plane and clearly struggling, and appointed himself my unofficial mentor. First rule, he told me over Chang beers at a bar on Soy 11, Forget everything you think you know about how things work. Second rule, never ever trust your Western instincts here. They'll get you into trouble every time. Colin introduced me to the expat circuit. The same bars, the same faces, the same conversations every night. These men, and they were all men, fell into two categories. The ones who'd found their paradise and wouldn't shut up about it, and the ones who'd been broken by Thailand but couldn't afford to leave. I was determined to be in the first category. I met Nim on my third week in Bangkok at a bar Colin had recommended in the Phrom Phong area. She wasn't working there. That's important to note. She was just out with friends, a rare night off from her job at a phone shop in one of the malls. Nim was 34, spoke decent English, and had the kind of easy laugh that made you feel funny, even when you weren't being particularly clever. She was also beautiful in that effortless way that Thai women seem to master. Minimal makeup, simple clothes, but absolutely stunning. We talked for hours that first night, about her job, her family in Udon Thani, her dreams of opening her own business someday, about my life in England, my decision to move to Thailand, my hopes for the future. She listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, never once made me feel like I was just another lonely foreigner with unrealistic expectations. When she agreed to see me again, I felt like I'd won the lottery. The courtship period lasted 3 months. 3 months of careful dates, gradual introduction to her friends, slowly building trust and affection. Nim never asked me for money, never hinted at financial difficulties, never played the victim card that I'd heard so much about from other expats' stories. She had her own life, her own income, her own dignity. That should have been my first clue that something was different about this situation. "I like you," she told me one evening as we walked along the Chao Phraya River. "You're not like other Farang men. You don't try to buy me. You don't think money solves everything." I was falling in love, properly in love, for the first time in my adult life, and she seemed to be falling for me too. When she suggested I meet her family, I thought I'd arrived at the promised land. Udon Thani province is nothing like Bangkok. The moment you step off the bus, you're in a different Thailand entirely, rural, traditional, beautiful in its simplicity. Nim's village was exactly what I'd pictured when I dreamed of authentic Thai life. Rice fields, small wooden houses, people who still lived according to ancient rhythms. Her family welcomed me with genuine warmth. Her mother, a tiny woman who spoke no English but communicated volumes through smiles and gestures. Her father, a rice farmer whose hands told the story of decades of hard work. Her younger brother, studying at university in Bangkok on a scholarship. They were good people. That's what made everything that happened later so much more devastating. The family dinner that first night was a revelation. Fresh fish from their pond, vegetables from their garden, rice from their fields. Simple food, but prepared with love and skill. I felt more at home at that plastic table under the single fluorescent bulb than I had in years of pub meals back in Manchester. "My family likes you," Nim told me later as we sat outside looking at stars you never see in the city. "They think you're a good man." That's when she told me about the land. Her family owned 30 ri of rice fields, but they were struggling. The weather had been unpredictable. The prices for rice had dropped, and they were facing the possibility of selling to developers who wanted to build a factory. "If we had money to invest in better irrigation, maybe some diversification into other crops, we could make the farm profitable again," she explained. "But we don't have that kind of money." The amount they needed was 800,000 baht, about 20,000 pounds. "I'm not asking you for anything," she said quickly, seeing the expression on my face. "I just wanted you to understand why my family is worried all the time." But of course, she was asking. Not directly, not crudely, but asking nonetheless. And I wanted to help. I wanted to be the hero who saved the family farm, who secured my place in this warm, welcoming community, who proved that love could conquer practical concerns. I had 30,000 pounds in savings, my entire life's accumulation of wealth, sitting in a building society account, earning pathetic interest. The decision to invest in the farm felt like the most natural thing in the world. Here was a chance to help the woman I loved, to secure our future together, to become part of something meaningful instead of just existing on the margins. Nim cried when I told her I wanted to help. Real tears, not the manufactured emotion I'd been warned about. Her family was overwhelmed with gratitude. Her father actually bowed to me, something that made me profoundly uncomfortable, but also proud. We went to the bank together to transfer the money. I remember the teller's expression when I asked to send £20,000 to a Thai agricultural account. Concerned, professional, but clearly wondering if I knew what I was doing. "You sure about this, sir? That's a substantial sum." I was sure. I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. The money would go toward a new irrigation system, some greenhouse construction for off-season vegetables, and improved soil treatment. Nim showed me detailed plans her brother had drawn up, complete with projected income increases and payback timelines. "In 2 years, we'll be able to pay you back everything," she promised. "And then we'll be partners in the business. You'll have income from the farm for the rest of your life." It seemed foolproof. The first red flag came 3 weeks later. I'd returned to Bangkok while the irrigation work was being done, but I called Nim every day for updates. One morning, she sounded different, stressed. "There's a problem with the irrigation company," she said. "They need more money up front than we expected." "How much more?" "Another 200,000 baht, £5,000. Not impossible, but it would drain my remaining savings down to emergency-only levels." "I'm sorry," she said, and she sounded genuinely distressed. "If we can't pay them, they'll stop the work and we'll lose everything we've already invested." I sent the money that afternoon. The second request for money came a month later. Equipment problems. The third came 6 weeks after that. Unexpected government fees. Each time, Nim was apologetic. Each time she promised it would be the last additional expense. Each time I felt like I had no choice but to pay or lose everything I'd already put in. By the end of my first year in Thailand, I'd invested £28,000 in the family farm. I was living on my monthly pension and whatever tiny amounts I could withdraw from my nearly empty account. But I told myself it was temporary. The farm would start generating income soon, and then I'd be financially secure for life. Plus, I had Nim. I had love. I had a family who treated me like one of their own. The first crack in the facade came during rice harvest season. I'd gone up to the village to help with the harvest, partly to be useful, partly to see the fruits of our investment. The new irrigation system was impressive. The greenhouse was producing beautiful vegetables. Everything looked exactly as planned. But when I asked about the income, about when we'd start seeing returns on the investment, Nim became evasive. "It's complicated," she said. "We need to pay back some loans first, and there are expenses." "What loans?" That's when I learned about the informal lending system in rural Thailand. Her family had borrowed money from neighbors, from local businessmen, from relatives. Not just small amounts, significant sums that carried crushing interest rates. "Why didn't you tell me about these debts before I invested?" I asked. "I didn't want you to worry," she said. "I thought we could handle it." But they couldn't handle it. The farm's income was being swallowed by debt payments. The money I'd invested had largely gone to keeping creditors at bay, not to farm improvements. I'd been played. Not maliciously, perhaps, but played nonetheless. The confrontation came during my second year in Thailand. I'd moved to a cheap apartment in Udon Thani to be closer to Nim and to monitor the farm situation more closely. My savings were gone, I was living month to month on my pension, and I was starting to panic about my long-term security. "I need to know exactly where we stand financially," I told Nim one evening. "I need to see all the books, all the accounts, everything." She resisted at first, said it was complicated, said her brother handled all the finances, but I insisted. The truth was devastating. The farm was drowning in debt. Not just the informal loans I'd learned about, but bank loans, equipment loans, even money borrowed from the local temple. The total debt was over 2 million baht, more than £50,000. My investment hadn't saved the farm. It had barely made a dent in what they owed. "Why didn't you tell me how bad things really were?" I asked. "I thought we could fix it," she said, tears streaming down her face. I thought if we had just a little money to get started, we could make it work. But there was more. Nim had been sending money to her ex-husband in Bangkok. The same ex-husband she'd told me was completely out of her life. He was gambling, couldn't hold a job, and she felt responsible for supporting him because of their daughter. Every month, 15,000 baht of the farm's meager income was going to Bangkok. Money that could have been used to pay down debt or invest in improvements was instead funding her ex-husband's self-destruction. I couldn't let my daughter's father become homeless, she explained. I understood. I even sympathized. But I also realized that I'd been living in a fantasy, believing that love and good intentions could overcome the harsh mathematics of rural poverty. The decision to leave Thailand wasn't dramatic. There was no big fight, no moment of revelation. Just a gradual recognition that I was trapped in a situation that would consume whatever financial security I had left without offering any realistic hope of recovery. I'd invested my life savings in a farm that couldn't generate enough income to service its existing debts, let alone provide returns to investors. I was in love with a woman who was supporting not just her family, but her ex-husband, and who had fundamentally misrepresented the financial situation I was walking into. Most painfully, I realized that what I'd interpreted as love might have been something more complicated. Genuine affection, certainly. Gratitude, absolutely. But love? The kind of love that would survive if I stopped being able to provide financial support? I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. The conversation with Nim about my departure was heartbreaking. She cried, begged me to stay, promised things would get better. Her family was devastated. They'd genuinely come to think of me as part of the family, and my leaving felt like abandonment. I'm not angry with you, I told her. You didn't set out to deceive me, but I can't keep pouring money into a situation that's never going to improve. She nodded through her tears. I understand. I'm sorry we failed you. But they hadn't failed me. I'd failed myself by believing that money could buy me a life I hadn't earned, relationships I hadn't built organically, solutions to problems that ran deeper than financial resources. Coming back to Manchester after 2.5 years away was like returning from a fever dream. Everything looked smaller, grayer, more mundane than I remembered, but it also looked real in a way that my Thailand life never had. I'd lost most of my savings, but gained something valuable, clarity about who I was and what I could realistically expect from life. I wasn't a romantic hero rescuing a beautiful woman from poverty. I wasn't a savvy investor turning Southeast Asian agriculture into a retirement gold mine. I wasn't the protagonist in some exotic adventure story. I was a 60-year-old man with a modest pension, limited social skills, and a tendency to confuse geographic location with personal transformation. The Thailand experience hadn't been entirely negative. I'd learned to live with less, to appreciate simple pleasures, to navigate unfamiliar cultures. I'd experienced genuine love, even if it was complicated by circumstances I couldn't control. But I'd also learned the most expensive lesson of my life, that running away from your problems rarely solves them, and that paradise is usually just another place with different problems. 6 months after returning to England, I found a small flat in Stockport, nothing fancy, but affordable on my pension and close to public transport. I started volunteering at a local charity shop, partly for something to do, partly to meet people who weren't comparing Thailand experiences in expat bars. The loneliness is still there, but it's different now. More honest. I know it's not going to be solved by a change of scenery or a relationship with someone who doesn't share my cultural background and life experience. I think about Nim sometimes. Wonder if the farm survived, if her family is okay, if she found someone else to help with the overwhelming financial pressures that rural Thai families face. I hope she did. Despite everything, I hope she found a way to make it work. But I also know that wasn't my responsibility to fix, and that my trying to fix it was probably as unfair to her as it was to me. The YouTube videos I watch now are different. Not expat success stories or warnings about Thai women, but practical content about retirement planning, social clubs for older men, ways to build meaningful lives within realistic constraints. I'm learning, slowly, to be content with being ordinary, to find satisfaction in small improvements rather than dramatic transformations, to understand that the grass isn't greener on the other side, it's just different grass with different maintenance requirements. If you're reading this and thinking about your own Thailand adventure, I'm not going to tell you not to go, but I will say this. Examine your motivations honestly. Are you running towards something specific and achievable, or are you running away from problems that will follow you regardless of geography? The men who succeed in Thailand long-term, and some do, are usually those who arrive with realistic expectations, solid finances, and genuine interest in Thai culture rather than just what they can get from it. They learn the language, build genuine relationships with locals beyond romantic partnerships, and understand that Thailand is a complex country with its own challenges and limitations. The men who fail, and I was one of them, are usually those who arrive with fantasy expectations, limited resources, and the belief that their Western passport entitles them to a level of success and happiness they couldn't achieve at home. Thailand isn't a solution to your problems. It's just another place to have problems, and those problems will be complicated by language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and the vulnerability that comes with being a foreigner in someone else's country. If you want to move to Thailand, go for it. But go with your eyes open, your finances secure, and your expectations grounded in reality rather than YouTube success stories and expat bar fantasies. And if you're thinking about investing your life savings in someone else's agricultural dreams, please, for the love of everything holy, don't. Some lessons are too expensive to learn the hard way. These days, I wake up in my Stockport flat, make tea the way I learned to make it in Thailand, strong, sweet, with condensed milk, and read the news on my tablet. Small pleasures, ordinary routines, manageable expectations. I've joined a walking group for older men. We explore the Peak District on weekends, have a pint afterward, talk about football and grandchildren and joint pain. It's not exotic, but it's real. These men know me as I am, not as some idealized version of myself I was trying to become. The loneliness is still there, but it's not the desperate, consuming loneliness that drove me to Thailand. It's more like a familiar companion now, present, but not overwhelming, something I can live with, rather than something I need to escape from. I still get emails from dating sites promising me connections with beautiful Asian women who are looking for Western men. I delete them without opening. That particular fantasy has been thoroughly cured. Sometimes, when it's raining and gray and I'm feeling particularly sorry for myself, I think about those evenings in Nim's village, the warmth of the family dinners, the simplicity of rural life, the sense of belonging somewhere beautiful and peaceful. But then I remember the constant anxiety about money, the gradual realization that I was seen more as a solution to problems than as a person, the uncomfortable truth that my presence was changing the dynamics of relationships in ways I didn't fully understand. The Thailand I miss never really existed. It was a projection of my own needs and desires onto a complex reality that had no obligation to fulfill my fantasies. The Thailand that does exist, complicated, challenging, beautiful in its own right, deserves better than to be treated as a backdrop for Western retirement dreams. I spent £28,000 and 2.5 years learning that you can't buy your way into a different life. That love, real love, can't be built on financial dependency and cultural misunderstanding. That paradise is usually just another place with air conditioning bills and visa requirements. But I also learned that it's possible to survive the collapse of your dreams and build something more modest but more sustainable in their place. That ordinary life, lived with realistic expectations and genuine connections, can be satisfying in ways that exotic adventures often aren't. If my story serves as a warning to other men considering their own Thailand adventures, then maybe those expensive lessons weren't completely wasted. And if it helps someone recognize that their problems won't be solved by a change of geography, then perhaps some good can come from my expensive education in the difference between fantasy and reality. The grass isn't greener on the other side, it's just different grass, and it still needs mowing. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I'm not insane anymore. Ordinary, perhaps, lonely sometimes, but not insane, and in its own quiet way, that feels like progress.